everyone! Denmark is not a cheap country, so in this video I would like to share with you the ways that you can save money living in Denmark. I would say that number one expense for everyone is housing. So if you live in Denmark and you think that rent is very expensive, then there are ways to get it cheaper. So if you just came to Denmark and you came to here to study or to work, you live in a rental apartment and you don't have any plans to buy your own apartment for the next, let's say, 5 years or 3 years. So the first thing that you should do when you arrive to Denmark is actually sign yourself up to the waiting list to Boligforeningen. Boligforeningen is a company that pre-builds some apartment complexes and they rent them out to people that are on the waiting list that sign themselves up. What is the advantage of renting an apartment from the Boligforeningen instead of the apartment from a private person? Well, first of all, the rent is much cheaper. For example, for 50 square meters in Copenhagen you would pay something like 12,000–14,000 Danish crowns. But if you rent the same apartment, the same size of the apartment from the Boligforeningen, that you can pay like 6–8,000 Danish crowns per month. That was number one advantage. And number two is when you move out of the apartment, you have more chances to get your deposit back if you rent it from the Boligforeningen instead of the private person, because usually it's very hard to get your deposit back if you rent it from someone, not from the company. I got my first offer for the apartment after 6 months being on the waiting list, and as far as I know, most of those Boligforeningens, they require you to pay the fee only once a year. And it's a very small amount, like 100 crowns. Also, in every city, some areas are cheaper to live, some areas are more expensive to live. So if you are pressed for money, then maybe it's a good idea to just take a train and live a little bit further, but still in the city. But instead you will pay much less in rent. Luckily in Denmark, public transportation is very well developed, so there is no problems to get to work and back home. Now let's figure out if it's possible to save some money on groceries. So here on the left we have some supermarkets that are actually a little bit more pricey, and on the right we have supermarkets that have more affordable prices. I would say the quality of food, well, the same. The only reason is that when you go to a supermarket, some of them look more presentable than the other ones. Also, the supermarkets that are a bit more expensive, they might have more choice of products. If you have a lot of time, you can look through the papers that you get in your mailbox that contain all the offers and campaigns from the supermarkets. You can save a lot of money following those campaigns. But you can also use an app that is called Too Good To Go. This app is supposed to reduce the amount of food waste after supermarkets stop working after, for example, 8 p.m. And the price for the food from this app is very, very low. So using this app, you can get food from supermarkets, gas stations, restaurants, and it's very popular mostly in a bigger city, but also not very big cities are available on the app. If you eat a lot of chocolate, sweets or soda, in Denmark it can be a bit pricey, but there is a way to save money on that. A lot of people who live in Denmark, they go to Germany or Sweden a few times a year with their car and they load the car with the products that are cheaper in this country than in Denmark. This way they save quite a lot of money, and it's very popular to go on those trips usually before Christmas. Gas and public transportation is also not cheap in Denmark, but there is a way to save money. If your work is located from your home more than 24 kilometers away, it means that you can have a right to state it in your tax, and in this way you will pay less taxes. If you live in the city, you can save much more money on replacing your public transportation with a bike. Of course, I understand that in Denmark the weather is not the greatest, and sometimes when you go to work you can just hit the rain and come to work completely wet. But most of the people have adopted and they just bike to work instead of taking a bus or metro. And if you decide to buy a second-hand bike in Denmark, then I would advise you to not buy it from the Danish eBay, which is called DBA, because most of those bikes can be stolen. So better to buy a new one, and as far as I know, the cheapest one is like 1,200 Danish crowns, so it's not that expensive. If you are traveling inside of Denmark, then trains are quite expensive. I don't have explanation why, but sometimes it's cheaper to fly to London and back than take a train from Copenhagen to Aarhus. Then it might be much better for your budget to use a shared ride, the app called GoMo. instead of taking a train. And it doesn't matter if you're a person who needs a ride or you are the car owner. Both sides can benefit from it. I was using it really a lot when I was living in Aarhus but working in Copenhagen, so I was traveling every weekend and coming back on Monday. Another thing that is really worth mentioning is the electricity prices. For the last year, a lot of people were complaining about that they can't really pay their bill for the electricity because their bills were more than 5,000, 10,000 Danish crowns. And it's obviously that we need to use electricity, but we can save some money by getting an app that allows you to track during what hours your electricity has the cheapest price. And then you can perform all these very high energy consuming operations like washing your clothes and cooking during those hours instead of when all other people use it. Please let me know in the comments if you have more tips on how to save money in Denmark, and I will see you in the next one.